everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How is your week going, gang? Man, I hope it's good. You know, we are several days now into the 0-degree Libra supermoon that was full that occurred on the Spring Equinox. And what does that mean for us? Well, it means that really we are in a time frame of the beginning of all new beginnings. Okay, this Spring Equinox coming in and having that full moon on the Spring Equinox and having it at 0 degrees Libra on that Spring Equinox is huge. It is huge. And that is extremely rare. So what we have there is a lot of circular patterns. We've got the circle of the full moon. We've got the 0-degree Libra. We have the beginning of all new beginnings, which is a circle. So we have a circular energy here coming in, asking us, hey man, what do you want to do with your life? Come on! Do you want to have it squandered on funky thinking or bummer thoughts, or are you going to be more Libra-like and want to get into reciprocity, kindness, demonstrating that we all have a space, holding a space for those who may have more difficulty than we do? Libra is all about luck, teamwork, sharing, balance, beauty. It can be perfectionistic, yet its attention is on gorgeous detail so that everyone may enjoy and be relished in the most aesthetic sense possible. So Libra, in its exalted space, is all about the many weighing in for the good of the many and the many sharing in the joy that the many have. Okay, so at our 0-degree Libra super full moon on the Spring Equinox, what that's bringing us, gang, is an opportunity to just start things fresh with a great attitude. That is literally it. Now, as we all know, the angelic realm, God, our mom, nobody is going to make us have a great attitude. That is completely our responsibility. And one of the fascinating teachers, I feel, coming forward in the fear that has been brought to us in the last 2 years, 2016 to 2019, 16, 17, well, 3 years really. In all of that, my math. Wow, aren't you glad I'm not doing your taxes right now? Yeah. What's been brought forward for all of us is in that dimensional shift that occurred from the very, very end of 2016 into the very beginning of 2019, we had the opportunity to explore what fear truly feels like. And do we want to be there? And is this the modality through which we wish to learn for the next however long humanity is engaged? And thankfully, we came out of that fear and chaos dimension. We're back in the dimension of love. However, if you've been walking through a field full of cow patties, and you just stomped up your boots full of cow poo, you better darn well wipe your feet off before you come in the house. So we've got some emotional and spiritual residue from walking through the cow poo fields of fear and chaos, and it just requires a little bit of scrubbing of the shoes. Now, what's great about that is our 0-degree Libra moon loves cleanliness. It loves pristineness. It loves getting in there and helping others just clean everything and make it beautiful. And so that as we move forward in this aesthetic time frame of new beginning, that we all are going forward in our most clean or impeccable intention. Now, it's hard for all of us to be impeccable. We're human. All right, God knows I have my good and bad days, just like the rest of us. Yet knowing that this Libra moon is here to support us in our new beginnings and support our enthusiasm and our altruism and our excitement on working with others. Again, Libra moon, 0 degrees, is about beginning anew, assuming the best in those that we would work with, partner with, be in a relationship with. This is all about assuming the best. Reach deep to your inner 5-year-old. Share those emotional gummy bears. Scrub the old cow poo off of the boots as we trekked through that field of fear and chaos and that dimension of chaos for the last couple of years. Enjoy the process. Laugh about some of the weird things we've experienced and move forward in this equinox time frame with so much enthusiasm. How many of you out there, seriously gang, How many of you out there have been feeling really excited about the particular path that you're on? It's like, wow, I actually am hopeful. This is so awesome. I am looking forward to what I have to bring into the world. Yes, welcome in that Libra moon. So I wanted to start this podcast with a brief overview of what that 0-degree Libra super full moon meant on the equinox, because what we're talking about here in the podcast has been a topic that I've received a lot of email on from a lot of not only InPsight Radio listeners, yet a lot of people across the United States especially, but across the world. And this topic I find extremely interesting because it folds in so many spiritual lessons of the last couple of years. And the topic is America actually on the brink of a civil war? I mean, is it really on the brink? Are we really going to allow our differences to boil down to a gunfight in the street? Is that actually going to happen? Now, what I find fascinating about this fear is that it's based on something that's actually happened in the United States. And I do think that it's very important as we go forward in this discussion to recognize that, yes, though there were outrageously politically divisive modalities occurring during the time frame of the Civil War, it's actually very, very important to remember that it wasn't just political ideologies that we were splitting hairs over. It was the means through which economics were derived in the South that we were splitting hairs over. I mean, you have to remember that back during the time of the Civil War, not only did we not have semi-automatic weapons, not only did we not have, oh my God, enter it in, social media, a way to share mass messages, a way to share consciousness out of the region of our country past word of mouth or letters. Yet, in that time frame in the American South, what was driving the economy was the enslavement and ownership of human beings, gang. I mean, it is a mind-boggling, disgusting, weird piece in not only America's history, but in the history and development of the human race in general, where humans have enslaved others in order to forward their money-making ventures. My goodness, look at the Middle East back in the biblical times, okay? We had Egypt enslaving everybody to build temples, pyramids, to do mining for them. We have a history in humanity of dominant cultures moving in and victimizing a culture who is not as strong in defense, and then taking those people and whooping them until they do the bidding of the dominant culture. I mean, this is a really icky, in my humble opinion, a really icky phase of human development and human learning. Ew! Ew, that we have to own people and, I mean, my little self, when I talk about this, everybody, my little cells just cringe. I get that, you know that feeling you get right before you throw up where your mouth starts to water? Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, I'm talking about this on this podcast, and I literally have that getting sick feeling at the idea of owning another, oh my God, I can't even hardly say it. Owning another human being just to make money, and we see that still in modern day. We see victimization of people all over the globe in the diamond mines of Africa. We see it in human trafficking with women all over the world. I mean, okay. I got to move forward in the topic here because I'm getting sick. So what we see here, gang, is that when we are evaluating whether or not we are on the precipice of a civil war in America, we have two pieces to that puzzle that are not at play currently. Not really. I mean, yes, we still have horrible human trafficking problems in the United States. Yet we are not driving our economy on the ownership of humans. And thank God. Oh, whoa. Okay, so when we talk about the Civil War, Lincoln, who I really believe, when I feel into the essence of Abraham Lincoln, as a psychic, as a channel, as an angelic channel, as a person who does the energy work that I do, when I feel into that Abraham Lincoln essence, I feel a deeply Christed consciousness there. I mean, this was a man who suffered from severe depression because he felt the woes of the world. Abraham Lincoln was a massive empath. He was a massive spiritual channel, and many believe historically that he might have been a gay male who, of course, at that time frame, had to be married because that's just what you did. Yet that's really kind of an aside for the purpose of this podcast. Yet when we have this amazing individual coming in to embody a consciousness, to be able to captain the United States through holding the bubble between the lines of non-victimization, even though, now weigh in with this time frame, gang. Okay, try to put your head here a minute. Even though America's huge industries back in that Civil War time frame were cotton, were textiles. We sold these spun goods to countries all over the world, okay? It wasn't like America's, was pulling oil out of the ground back then. It's not like we were mining back then. I mean, we were, but not to the point we are now. America's value was, to other countries especially, was in our textiles and in our farming. And a majority of those textiles and those items that were farmed were growing in warmer regions of the country because that's where things grow, okay? And regrettably, during that time frame in history, the people who were growing much of those items, not all, but a majority, probably 90% of those items, owned humans that did all the work for free and ate disgusting things that were leftovers from the slaughter and were treated inhumanely and slept on straw and were literally considered by the people who owned them not human. And those people, I think, really convinced themselves of that. Are you ready for this? Those slave owners, this is the thing. I mean, and again, I'm clearing my mouth a lot because I've got that sick feeling as an empath. I'm feeling back into that time frame, and it just makes me sicker than a dog. It's so awful. Wow. However, I'm going to hold it together for this podcast. So onward we trudge. When I feel back into that and I look historically as well, just intellectually, we are dealing with a demographic who went to court to defend their right to own human beings. And you know what their defense was in court? To prove that the African populations were not human. Their defense, get ready, brace up. This is a gem. This is a real winner here. Their defense was the freaking book of Genesis in the Bible. I am not even kidding you. And their defense, here it comes, was that these people, these human beings that had been abducted out of their villages in Africa and brought across on ships and sold on blocks of wood, chained to them as animals in a marketplace, their defense was, well, this is okay. Because see, here in the Bible, it says that when Cain and Abel got into an altercation and Cain killed Abel, that made God really, really mad. And so Cain was marked with a mark upon his skin, and he was cast out of the Garden of Eden to go live with the savages in the mountains. Okay, never mind the fact, as a complete and total, absolute non sequitur aside here, that, Adam and Eve are supposed to be the first people on earth, but Cain gets marked by something on his skin and kicked out of the Garden of Eden to live with the people in the mountains. Who the hell are the people in the mountains if Adam and Eve are the first people? But I digress. That's a whole nother podcast. Back to our topic. So here we are with these litigators in court during the time that precursed the Civil War, claiming that the human beings that they had snapped up, and it literally a lot of times in the middle of the night in bags. Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible how they culled the populations to become and be slaves. It just, again, makes me sick. They are arguing that those people were actually Cain's offspring, and that the dark color of their skin was the mark of lesser than put onto them by God. So Cain's mark upon his skin was a pigmentation issue, according to the arguments on the book of Genesis by, in my personal opinion, these completely insane litigators back during the times that precursed the Civil War. These folks were arguing that the darkness of people's skin marked them by God as not being the chosen race. Are you seeing where some of our American racism is stemmed from? Okay? I mean, this gets so twisted that, oh my Lord, I'd love to do a podcast just on the spiritual physics of racism and fear and what that actually means. However, for the purpose of our topic, it's important to bring this in because a lot of people have been writing to me saying, Danielle, are we going to be plunged into a civil war in America right now in 2019? Now, listen, we are in a different space in America than we were when a majority of literally our economy globally, as well as our economy within our then forming country, was built upon farming and textile industries whose main way of making money was owning people and not paying them. I mean, this is such a sick and wrong even period of our history. However, one of the big reasons we got into that civil war was because those people who were making hand over fist money in those plantations were absolutely not willing to start paying their people, let alone to have to face the amazingly staggering awareness that the beings working for free in their fields are actually human instead of animals that were set with a mark upon their skin because of their transgressions based upon the lineage of Cain. I mean, we are talking a complete economic meltdown. We are talking a complete spiritual meltdown. And we are talking a sociological meltdown for the people who actually had convinced themselves just to make a buck that these weren't people. Okay, so we are talking about not just simply issues of racism. We are talking about issues of economics. We are talking about issues of morality. I mean, during that time in our history, Abraham Lincoln stepping in with this Christed consciousness to be able to hold the banner up of saying this is wrong to own people. Okay, this is wrong. For the fact that Christed consciousness came in during that time frame was not accidental. I mean, Lincoln had huge members of his cabinet and the Congress saying, dude, you got to back this off. Okay, you not only are pissing off half of the country, yet you are jeopardizing our economic exports. I mean, you can't just step up and say, okay, you have to pay everybody who's working for you. You can't just say free people. I mean, our whole entire country's commerce in terms of what the rest of the world is basing our commerce upon is based on this system. And Lincoln just said, too bad. Too bad. This is inhumane, it's wrong, and it's disgusting. And if it means that our republic can no longer stand within the world because our republic is truly built upon slavery, then there's something wrong with our republic. And we need to fix it within. Now I'm going to take a sidebar here. When I talk about a Christed consciousness, what am I talking about? You know, those that are raised in the Christian faith, we hear Jesus Christ. Christ. The word Christ is, for lack of a better way to put it, it's enlightenment. It's one with God. It's understanding spiritual principles past our human need to define them through our fears. Okay? So a Christed consciousness has sat with many people throughout history. The Buddhas. We've had many prophets in many different religions come through with that Christed, or universal, or just fantastic overview consciousness. And that, in my humble opinion, as I feel into Abraham Lincoln's spirit during that time frame, was shared by Abraham Lincoln. I mean, to have a Christed consciousness means that you stand in the gap for a very difficult principle because it truly is the most balanced means spiritually in order for humanity to evolve. And believe me, this is going to make mad, generally, those who are driving over the top of these principles just to make money. I mean, the almighty dollar, right? And that's based in fear consciousness. So when we go back to the beginning of all of these principles, what we're really looking at here when people ask, are we going to have a civil war in the United States at this time? Well, is it possible? Sure, I suppose anything is possible. Yet myself and many, many other spiritual teachers, not only just in the United States, but in the country, have been working really hard during this last several years to make sure that we all don't go a little bat crap crazy and get sucked into the fear narrative that drives polarization for the purpose of being able to sell people stuff, whether it's guns or political contributions or underground bunkers or whatever. Lord, oh man, okay. So what we're seeing in America is, yes, we are at a evolutionary point in our history. We are at a turning point. We're trying to figure out who we are. We went through those couple years of fear and chaos dimension and experimented with what that felt like. And great, honestly, when I look at the great experiment of that, I wouldn't want to do it again, but I am really happy that we went there as a country. And why am I happy about it? Because there are so many of us, regardless of what your lens is, whether your lens is that of a tree-hugging person who changed themselves to a tree, or whether your lens is that person who is a constitutionalist who wants to sit up on your hill and clean your guns and decide that everybody should just be a good person and do the right thing. Whatever your deal is, we have all realized that polarizing to the point of fighting just doesn't work. And so here's what I find fascinating, okay? For those of you that follow the work that I put out, you're going to see that back in 2016, I put out a presidential prediction that talked about Hillary Clinton winning the next election. Now, I talked about how there was no timeline that Trump was the president. Clearly, we have Trump as the president. Yet, if you go on to listen to that video, it talks for 9 minutes about how we as people, no matter who gets elevated to the presidency, are going to be what turns this country around because we recognize that it is us doing the hard work and coming together. And that's what liberates us from this idea that one person is our big fat savior. Okay? Now, when we look at the shift in dimensions, we see all kinds of different energies that came to play here. And really, at this time frame, does it matter that Hillary Clinton was actually our 45th president? Well, yeah, kind of. Yet at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters, we can cry in our soup about that, yet the only thing that really matters is how we have gone through this lesson productively. How did we do it productively? And this is why we are asking these questions of, are we going to have a civil war in America? So no, though we do not have we do have human beings that are being sold and traded. It's called human trafficking and it's sickening in America. Yet we do not have an economy based upon literally slave labor. We do have a lot of economy in our fields, especially agriculturally, that is based on folks working in those fields that are not documented American citizens, yet those folks are being paid, thank God. So, those people are not owned by other people. And I understand there's a large part of America that's very upset that those people are being paid because they're not American citizens. That's a whole nother podcast. I lived in California for 11 years, and it's a complex issue. However, I didn't really see, the same people who were wanting benefits and wanting to be paid certain wages lining up to go pick grapes either. So that gets into a very detailed and deep discussion about state needs. However, when we're talking about the era of slavery versus our era now, what we're talking about is back in the precursor of the Civil War, with the Christed consciousness of Lincoln coming in, saying, we're going to free the slaves, people, we were talking about a disruption to the way that America's fabric had been woven at that time. And it was going to boil down to economics. So really, there's really only one big way. Well, there's two ways that I look down into our timelines of America. There's two ways that we could erupt into a civil war. And both of these modalities are minority timelines. And man, when you're looking at the outcome of the United States of America in my job, and my job is to factor in all modalities or all energies, that's what these angels help me do, is read temporal timelines. Because as we know, we do not have just one big fat future, because that takes out free will. And I understand that's really frustrating for people that want a get out of jail free card with psychics. And it's a big gong that folks who are critical of those who work in the spiritual or psychic field tend to bang that gong of, well, they just used the get out of jail free card for free will, so they don't have to be accountable for what they say. I'll tell you something, gang. I will always be accountable for every single thing I say because I said it. Whether it comes to pass or not, whether it's a, quote, accurate prediction or not, I do my very best to bring through what I've got to bring through and teach what I'm given to teach. And past that, my job here is done. So when we have people who want to cast shame upon folks who do what I do, and granted, there's some pretty interesting little puppies in every single field, including my own. And there's some of those folks who think I'm a pretty interesting puppy. So there's funky people in every field, and there's great people in every field. Yet when we want to bring forward the shame card and say to anybody, you could be fallible, and you're just saying that free will is part of the equation because you need an out. I do not need an out, okay? I don't need an out. And the reason I'm saying this, gang, is because it's very important to understand the perspective through which these messages come, from me anyway. I don't need an out because I am not owning this information. I'm passing it along. I left up that prediction that said that Hillary Clinton would be our next president. It's still on YouTube. Still. Now, I disabled the comments because people went a little completely bat crap crazy after the election and started threatening to kill each other on the thread. They were threatening to kill me. It just got stupid. And not to mention, there were a ton of paid trolls on that thread that were really fuming people into a frenzy. So I just disabled the comments. Yet I absolutely left that video up there. You can still watch it. And I made a comment about why I disabled the comments because there's a lot in that video that's still very relevant today. Now, why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because when we look at our futures, and notice I said futures, we have choices here. We have choices in how we want to represent ourselves to our friends, our neighbors, how we bring messages in. And my choice is to simply bring them in. There they are, and let it fall where it falls, because I can only do as well as I can do with my job. Why do I bring that up? Because that consciousness, if we take out shame, is what helps us avoid a civil war. Now, there are a few timelines here that if we allow ourselves to lose our head and to lose our balance, that we're absolutely going to spin into a place of deep duress, and we could war with one another. However, my job is to do my best to pass on alternatives to that so we don't end up there. However, in answer to your question, could America be plummeted into a civil war? It's important to remember that something would have to happen in America that would threaten the fabric and the identity of the nation, just like freeing the slaves really did affect to some people's ideology, the economic fabric and the world trade value of the United States. Okay, we're talking economics there. So what would cause that in our modern day? Well, when I look down our timelines, one of the fulcrums for a potential uprising, let's call it that, would be a failure in our judicial system to hold those accountable who allowed this grievous, if you want to call it the stealing of an election, to happen. Because that actually really did happen, gang. And I am not saying people didn't vote for our president. I know a lot of wonderful people who voted for our president because he had an R next to his name and they'd been voting for R's forever and they didn't believe in Hillary and that's the way they went. I'm not taking those votes away from those people. I am saying that there was a lot that went into that election that was absolutely engineered so that individual would get elevated to the presidency so we'd have at least 4 years of business running rampant and making a shite ton of money while the country just sucked wind. Okay, this has always been about money. We're now seeing that. So if our judicial system and our checks and balances in government do not decide to do something about the fact that elections can be absolutely outright engineered and stolen, then there is a massive group of people in the country who are going to be exceptionally unhappy about that. And so this is what we're looking at right now in politics. We're looking at the big players, our president and the president's direct children and whatnot. We're looking at them under an extreme microscope, but we're looking at the people on the outside of them getting indicted, putting in prison, blah. Because if we take down the folks who are actually doing business in America in an unethical way, we're going to pull up the roots of how a lot of big business is actually done in America. And we are going to disrupt the fabric of the nation. And if we do that, then we've got people who are going to come out of the woodwork rooting for their guy, which in this case is Donald Trump, who view the going after of the modality of unethical disruption in business. They're going to view that as an oustie removal. So they uprise, okay? Here's the flip side. So we do nothing to those individuals. We do nothing to the Trump organization, which again, this has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with just shady business practices. And honestly, Donald Trump is not the only business guy that has really shady business practices. I mean, come on, I could name a whole bunch of others here, yet it's not the point of the podcast. So Donald Trump is one of many, many business people who do business the way he does. Now, he happens to play some particularly dirty pool. And at this point, I sort of watch him like a fantastic experiment. Like I feel like I'm watching an old mob movie, where the mob boss elevates to being president. And you're like, oh my God, old Uncle Don is president. Can you believe it? Yet what we're dealing with is not politics. What we're dealing with is sociopathic economic behavior that violates the Constitution when you apply it to the presidency. Think about that. So if we are to actually address that, that's going to disrupt the fabric of the nation because it starts pulling up the roots of all these other business owners that do business the exact same way. We can't just put Donald Trump on the chopping block and ignore everybody else. It's like saying we can't just liberate the slaves in Alabama, but leave Louisiana and Arkansas and everything else there. We have got to do the whole thing. So when we have the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, coming forward saying we are not going to impeach because it is too divisive at this time, you've got elements in the Democratic Party madder than hell saying, what is wrong with you? We need to take them down. We need to take them down. Well, what Speaker Pelosi is doing is looking at a little bit of history here. And I think there's a little bit of, stuff getting pulled behind the strings in the old guard in Washington that needs to go. That's another issue in another podcast. However, overall, Nancy Pelosi's an Aries. And whether you like her or you don't like her, that woman is one shrewd cookie. And she is looking at the long game. She's not looking at the short game. And she also is a steward of history. So it's not to say that something won't happen to the plutocracy or the oligarchy or the sociopathic consumerism that's taken over America, yet we're going to have to go about it in a way that does not disrupt the entire fabric of the country, having to call out all these other business owners that do the same thing that Donald Trump does, at the same time ripping up the belief structure of all these people that think that guy's in there just doing his thing because we have first world problems in America, we don't study history, and we sure as heck don't study our candidates. Okay, so that's one way that we can plummet ourselves into a civil war is to absolutely, unabashedly draw a line in the sand and say, this whole group has to go, and we're starting now. Now, here's another way we can plummet ourselves into a civil war, is to absolutely do nothing and allow only the henchmen for these business individuals to go to prison, while the real true cause sits untouched, and they are still allowed to execute past our constitutional laws their power. If we see a categoric failure in our nation's ability to hold our rulers accountable to our constitutional standards, all bets are off, people. Okay, all bets are off. So you can see that we are in a really interesting, precarious rock and a hard place position. And it is important for me to pass on to you that I regularly weigh in with the consciousness of our main leaders in the country. I'm just curious. And that's an aptitude I have. So I weigh in and I get to see their human struggles. I get to see what they're dealing with. I get to see their freakouts. And there is a lot going on in this country economically that we are not privy to, because our media doesn't want us to know that. And when I say our media doesn't want us to know that, I am not demonizing journalists. I have some friends in journalism that are amazing people, and they win Emmys, and they are fantastic, and they want the truth out there. Yet their networks are owned by corporations that need the money of advertisers. So if we're going along and we're truly telling the truth about how sociopathic our consumerist culture has become, then all those people who advertise get kind of mad. And those organizations that hold the place for the distribution of information, NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, every one of them has to go back to the bottom line. So, when you ask me, are we going to be plummeted into a civil war? I do not see that we are. Yet we are literally walking a razor's edge because we are trying to navigate bringing change into our nation that will absolutely rip up the fabric of what it's become. And on a large corporate scale, our country has become deeply, deeply corrupt in how the government is run. And that's no shock to anybody. I mean, people run political campaigns on this. When I look at the consciousness of our leaders, there are some leaders who absolutely know what the system is, absolutely know what it would mean to change it, and just don't want to because they're old. And they just want to retire out and be done with it. And they look at it and say, well, this system's never going to change. And I'm going to make as much money for my family and kids as possible, and then I'm out of here. And those people are on both sides of the aisle. And can I just say, in an alternate universe, if I was ever president, the first thing I'd do is get rid of that aisle, and everybody would have to have mixed seating. We'd have Democrat, Republican, and I would purposely put the Democratic Socialists right next to the Tea Party people. Hey, if you're fringe, you get to sit with your fringe people. That's the way we're going to rock this thing. However, I'm not president, so onward we roll. So what we have here, gang, is when we are evaluating where we're at in the potential for a civil war, we also need to bring in another aspect to this. And that aspect is people's willingness to kill one another. Now, when we go back to the times of the Civil War, you got to remember that there was history books that spoke about war and blood and guts and killing, yet even the photograph was a very, very new invention. So we might have etchings or drawings in newspapers, and journalism back then was much more subjective. It was very dramatic. It was very emotional. We've evolved to a point of just the facts, ma'am. And then we de-evolved back to the emotional fake news. And now we're evolving back to just the facts, ma'am. Yet people didn't really know. They knew what war was, but they didn't really know. And I'll tell you, in the 1800s, we did have some wars going. We had the Spanish-American War. We had all kinds of wars. The wars with the, quote, American Indians. We had wars, yet they were in pockets. And most of our country was so vast and so big that people were living out in the middle of nowhere, and half the time people couldn't even afford newspapers. A lot of people couldn't even read. Okay, so why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing up the fact that in order to plunge ourselves into a civil war in modern America, we've got to actually want to experience that blood and bullets and grossness and polarization that we read about during school shootings. We actually have got to get to a point where experiencing all these horrible things that we see in terrorist videos is something we're okay with. And let me tell you, gang, the fortitude of America is not where it was at one time. We don't really want to become an encasement for bullets, okay? We don't want to blow the brains out of our family members because they have a differing political ideology. We don't want to do that because now we know what it looks like. We know what it smells like. We know what it feels like. We live in a culture of violence in America that is appalling and has degraded our sense of who we are. It has created a millennial generation of children that can't even be around negativity because they are born into a post-traumatic stress world. I had a dream a while back. And forgive me if I've shared this dream with you, yet it's very relevant and it's being brought to my attention for a reason. I had a dream a while back, and I'll just stick to the bullet points. I was hanging out with a bunch of 20-somethings in this dream. And here in the country in Montana, in real life, we have Pomeranians, and I have a mini American Eskimo. And so, we live out here in Gallatin Gateway in Montana, outside of Bozeman, in this gorgeous house on all this acreage. Yet we share neighboring property lines with people who have hunting dogs and big dogs and functional dogs. And here comes my wife and my daughter and myself, and we've got our pretty little Poms and my little beautiful Angelo, the mini American Eskimo, who's like Zoolander. He's really sure he's gorgeous. Anyway, these are city dogs moving to the country. So we've had a bit of a training regimen with them, not to bark at every golden eagle, not to bark at every bear, not to bark at every horse and cow, because that's what you do. City dogs bark at intruders. So we have these little collars that the doggies wear, and we have little remote controls. This is in real life, okay? And these collars can be activated to vibrate to let the dogs know that they're doing something that's over the line. And they can also make a sound, and there is a function on these collars to where if you absolutely had to save the dog's life, you could give them an extremely mild little electrical zap. And it's the equivalent of sticking your tongue on a 9-volt battery. I mean, it doesn't feel good. Yet if your dog is charging towards a bear to try to, attack it or whatever, just giving it just a super mild little interruption in its instinct to attack is probably going to save its life. So we've got these little collars on our doggies, and we never I think I've maybe used the super mild, like get your attention, barely. There's like a setting of 1 to 100, and we have them on like 5 if we have to give them just this mild, like, hey, getting your attention there, puppy, don't kill yourself. But I don't even know that any of us have used that setting. So we use the vibrate setting to get the dog's attention and tell them not to bark at things. And it's just a way to tell the doggies what a real intruder is, and a way to teach them, hey, you don't need to bark at a cow. It's a cow. Vibrate. No, let's just not do that. It just gets their attention. So in my dream, I was hanging out and I was talking to these 20-somethings. And in my dream, I was taking one of these little vibrate collars off of our doggie. And this 20-something looked at the collar and she says, what is that? And I told her, I said, well, I explained what I just explained to you. And in the dream, these kids, they were just looking at each other, and they all like shared a look, and they all got up and they all walked off. And I said, hey, where are you guys going? And this girl looked back at me and she said, you are a very violent person, and we just can't be around that. And she walked off. And I woke up realizing that I had been given that dream for a reason. because our millennial generation has been born into a United States that fears that the terrorists are going to take us over at every minute. These are kids that grew up with school shootings and lockdowns and drills. I mean, this is affecting them in a way that hopefully in the long term, in the new world, they will recognize that, okay, hey, guess what? Violence isn't the answer. Yet what we are also doing is turning out a generation of humans that are a little traumatized and are withdrawing because the old world insists on pushing forward this god-awful modality of war or nothing. Okay, so why do I bring this up? I bring this up because we're talking about the probability of a civil war in America. And it would take a massive amount of young people to get in there and war. And they just don't want to. Okay, now, thank God. I mean, it's heartbreaking that my daughter has been born into a generation that is just looking at guns and all kinds of weirdness going, whatever. And there are some young people that are raised by older people who have been programmed that it's better to die with a bullet in your head than to give up your American freedom. Yet it's very important for us to remember that those folks are a vast minority. The fringes are the minority. The media covers the fringes because it's clickbait and it creates algorithms that create advertising dollars. They are the minority. So when we talk about the probability of a civil war in America, could it happen? Yes. Could it happen by disturbing the fabric of our nation? By pulling up sociopathic businesses practices, by ousting an administration that basically won through cheating? Could it happen? Sure, it could happen. Yet what it's going to take is people to fight the war. And what we don't have in America is a population overall that is willing to die for its cause. Okay? Now, it's important to remember that in the time of the Civil War, the South seceded from the rest of the country. They started printing up their own money. They literally appointed their own president. So what we forget when we study American history, well, we don't study it. That's our big ass problem in this country is we don't study it. However, if we did, what you'd see is that the entire southern part of the country, that again, was driving a massive amount of commerce for the country, both internally and globally at that time. Cotton was huge coming out of America. It was huge. So during all of this, that portion of the country seceded. They seceded because Lincoln said, gang, this is not right. We need to stop owning human beings. It's wrong. And Lincoln responded to that seceding saying, no, you do not get to take your toys and run away. You do not get to pout into the next generation of slavery. You will be part of one great house known as the Republic of the United States of America. And remember, America, the United States, is not a democracy, okay? It is a republic that exercises the experimental modality of democracy. That's our experiment, yet it is a republic of states. So when we say things like America's a democracy, well, one could argue it's a democratic republic, but actually it's a republic. And how we choose to operate within that republic is up to us, okay? So when we talk about a civil war, could we have a few fringe factions get so whooped up into a freakout that they would mobilize and march against neighborhoods and march against minorities? Yes, they could. Yet unless they're all going to move to one collective state, and unless that one collective state is going to decide to secede from the nation, then what we're left with is terrorist cells. Now, what I would tell you is, are we ripe to have American terrorist cells that explode in the name of their cause within our country? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And we're seeing that with the right-wing, fringy, white males that are going crazy and shooting people up. Yet you'll notice that the news is not covering those people as terrorists because we're busy talking about the brown people all over the world. It's all those people. Those people are the terrorists. Not our homegrown, little special chickens that we have here that go crazy and get so fringed down into their rabbit holes of fear that they come out shooting. All right? Now, it's very important. We have about 10 minutes left in this podcast, and it's very important I get a few messages across here. One of them is that there's a lot of industrial complexes that are very invested in we as Americans remaining divided and fighting with one another. Okay? Two of the biggest are our political organizations. The RNC and the DNC are very invested in us hating the other side. Partisan politics are a huge divisive problem in why things are so crappy right now. So, root for your team, root for whoever you're into, but realize that those two organizations are simply there to fund themselves. Sorry. Listen, I'm a lefty by nature, okay? But even I look at our political organizations and the corporate structure of these organizations and say, well, that's completely the problem. These organizations are so busy covering their own butts, they'd let the whole country burn as long as they were funded. That's the truth. So it doesn't mean that there aren't amazing people working through the structures or scaffolds of those organizations, trying to make a difference on both sides of the aisle. A lot of those people get in knowing that the corporate franchises are only out to serve themselves, and they're doing their best to go through the current gateway that we have established to get to government, to bring changes that we, the people, will benefit from. Okay? So we don't need to demonize the people. Just understand that the organizations are there to support themselves monetarily. That's number one. Number two, understand that things like the gun lobby, understand even, I don't care if it's far right or far left, you go far enough on either end and you have an agenda that's zealot energy. And you get into that zealot energy and you lose the commonality for the whole. So getting too fringy on either one and getting furious with people because they're trying to strike a balance, that is the textbook definition of extremism. That is literally how terrorist cells are built. They are built upon fear, extremism, division, a slow drip of see how you're being used. Whether it is the ideology of the deep state, which is a slow drip, it's a slow boil for those who get into the deep state stuff about how we're all being taken over by crazies, or whether it's the far, far left and it's the slow drip of how the religious right is coming to get us all. It's extremism. It's how terrorist cells are built. So we are ripe in our country to have explosive terrorist cells that actually lash out. And, really, when you're looking across the board demographically, I'm not saying that a lefty can't go crazy and go nuts. The power of the left is groupthink, and it's also the weakness of the left. And the left would just get so fed up that as a group, it would just shut down participating. The right's a little different. The right, fosters extreme individuality to the point where people, are out there stockpiling guns. I know a lot of Democrats in Wyoming who have guns and go shoot targets and go hunting and do all kinds of things. But we're talking stereotypically here. So the right tends to be, the people who have the guns. That doesn't mean the lefties don't have the guns. It's just that the lefties want to go hug a tree and they want to, shoot their deer and then pray to the earth gods and say, thank you for this beautiful thing we've been given. And I know a lot of righties that do that too, by the way. A lot of great conservative hunters give back in conservation. They give back to the environment. So, we can't just pigeonhole here. Yet all I'm saying is that there is a lot of fear talk on the right. And there's a lot of fear talk on the left, too. Oh, my God, I'm so sick of it. I don't even listen to talk radio anymore. It makes me just sick. I mean, I love me my CNN and MSNBC, but my God, if I have to listen to the one more droning anchor say one more time, Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump, I'm like, gang, we don't need a blow-by-blow of the deconstruction of the old world. How about providing some really great messages on what we could do to build it? Yes, what I'm getting to in a very roundabout way is the fact that the conservative pundits are the ones that are frothing people up. They are the ones, those conservative pundits, saying things like, well, you better go buy your bullets and you better dig in because a civil war is coming. A civil war is coming. They are the ones, and you need to own it, right? Okay, because you guys are doing this, and you're doing it because it gets you listeners, and maybe these pundits actually believe this. Yet pushing that fear consciousness is a far right thing. The far left thing is all like, we have to disassociate from this and go start our own green communities and stop sending your kids to school and stop vaccinating and creating our own pockets of, whatever. The left is about, the far, far, far left is about pulling away and doing its own thing and unplugging from the system. The far, far, far righties are about you better link in because the system's coming for you and you're going to have to fight against it. So, you get this really weird way of dealing with something that you're afraid of. Yet, gang, it is the right-wing pundits that are pushing the idea of a civil war. So what you've got are all these people listening to this who probably really believe it because that's their news source. So their lens of the world is full of fear and hatred. Now, I'm sorry people don't like to hear this, but the gun lobby does push a lot of legislation. It does fund a lot of these shows. People make money off of fear. And hey, the left could be making the money too. They're just making money other ways. So all I'm saying is that when we hear that the Civil War could break out at any minute in America, the dynamics just aren't there. The troops aren't there. The willingness to die for a cause just isn't there outside of a few fringe terrorist cells that are whooping themselves up. Really? And you get a terrorist cell locked away in Montana or Texas or I don't care where, Wyoming. I'm just picking our states that, where this stuff has happened before. The National Guard comes in and breaks them up. Okay? So are we going to have a civil war to its definition of the country dividing on principle and fighting with each other? Not in the way that we did before. Am I seeing a raise in local terrorist groups that think they're being patriotic by attacking the weirdest thing ever, like schools? Yeah, I am seeing a raise in that. Am I and many other people in my field working like crazy to be able to debunk this idea that there's those people against these people? Yes. Yet the key to this is giving away the idea that if we come into listening to one another, or what has been absolutely highly demonized by both the RNC and the DNC as being moderate or centrist, you'll notice that the fringe recruiters for zealous ideology have made the words centrist and moderate bad words. You know why? Because when we're getting along, there's not enough money coming into political campaigns. Do you really want to be manipulated like that? I don't know about you, but I sure don't. I had a friend of mine, a really good friend actually, and I love her. We were talking about politics, and she got really upset with me. And this is a long time ago, 2017, which by today's spiritual standards is a million years ago. And I was running for mayor of Billings, Montana, and the mayor's position is nonpartisan, thank God. So we were talking about different positions, and my friend said to me, you are awfully soft on conservatives. I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, if you're going to have a career in politics, and I actually thought about that. I thought about not as a career, but a path to bring change through a political modality. I thought, wow, we could be trailblazers. We could change this, whatever. And I gave it some consideration at a time, not because I wanted to be a politician. I desired to be a trailblazer and bridge builder. And I thought that was a modality that could probably use an overhaul. And right now we're seeing Marianne Williamson give a run at it. And we're seeing other people give a run at it for all kinds of reasons. I decided at that time it probably wasn't time for me to do that, if at all ever. Yet my friend says, you're awfully soft on conservatives. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, you give them a pass on a lot of things, and that really paints you as a moderate or a centrist. And I laughed. And I said, well, I'm a consensus. So is a consensus now called a moderate or a centrist? And she says, yeah, but it's really a dirty word. I said, to whom? To whom? And she says, well, to anybody who stands for anything. And I said, well, who's made it a dirty word? I said, if you look at a scale, the center point is the point to which all balance is created. That's where all the balance is. The balance isn't on the far right or far left of the side of the scale. The central point is what brings balance. So why is balance a bad word? And she kind of couldn't answer that. And she said, well, would you label yourself as a moderate or a centrist? I said, I am a consensus. Okay? I am for consensus. You can call me what the hell you want, but I will never vary from the fact that coming into a place of functional consensus and by giving a little and receiving a little is how we grow. We can't grow having it all our way or no way. And she said, well, that's not a very progressive viewpoint for you to have. And I said, actually, it's a wildly it's so radical that nobody's even doing it right now. It's a radical belief that all of our brilliance coming together will actually solve the problem. I said, it's so radical that nobody can get on board with it. I said, actually, I think it's so progressive that it's come right around the coin, right around that circle to be absolutely undefinable unless it's labeled as moderate or centrist or something negative, because it's so progressive that people can't get out of their own dang bubbles to figure out that if we all came forward, we could solve this whole mess. By being dignified, by bringing forward our best ideas, by giving up a little political leverage for the good of the whole. I mean, wow, this is so progressive that it scares everybody to death because they don't think they have a chance in Hades of getting elected. So people don't do it because they've got to align. They've got to align with one franchise or the other franchise, or they'll never make it through the keyhole because we have disempowered America through these franchises, making everybody believe that the franchises are running the country instead of empowering the humans that live in the country to run their own inner persons with dignity. And she looked at me and she said, well, I hope you're really not considering a run in American politics, because that ideology would never fly. And I said, well, it wouldn't fly right now, but just wait until we go through our far right and far left stages. People are going to get sick of it, and they're going to want to go back to just doing the right thing for the right reasons and not labeling everything and administrating and governing the nation under the principles that we can do it all. We can save money. We can budget better. We can actually take those trillions of dollars out of the Pentagon budget where we launder money for $900 toilet seats and put them into social education while not taxing the dickens out of people because we're budgeting better. I mean, we can do it all, but not right now. Because right now we're still in the phase of wondering if we're even going to have a civil war. And by my timelines, the answer is no. However, it is our job as Americans at this time to bring forward a new way of interacting with one another. Gang, our country is too big. We have too many people in it. We have too many belief systems. The idea that we can just build a fence around our ideas and live in a compound with like people only, that works if you run a cult, okay? That works if you live in a neighborhood that quarantines itself off. Yet we are part of a greater collective. And you don't have to change your beliefs. You can have every single thing that is important to you. You can work diligently for those things for our nation, for your kids, for your family, for your bank account. You can work diligently. Yet it is on us, not our politics, not the fearmongers, not the pundits, not on the psychics, not on the priests. It is on us individually to decide that we are ready to come together in what is important and support those decisions with our buying power and support those decisions with our votes or no votes. We, the people, decide the course of this nation, not the government. We allow the government to decide this for us. Yet as long as we are falling prey to fear-mongering and to consumerist messages that simply exist for the sole purpose of driving money out of us based upon our fears rather than our hopes, as long as we are hearing political messaging that says, I'm going to beat my opponent, we need to fight for what we want, this person is defeatable, as long as we go into it with the mentality that one side needs to be dominated, gang, we're part of the problem. And I'm sorry, I really don't want to hear anymore about how people come forward and say, well, it's never going to change. It's never going to change. Okay, well then let's just keep complying with a-holism and saying it's okay. Yet it does change when we change. Because the quantum fabric of our world, of our country especially, the quantum fabric responds to the primary consciousness that floods it. So if we want to be full of fear, we're going to get fear. If we want to be full of polarization, we're going to be full of polarization. If we really want to push a civil war, by God, we probably could. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard up the hill at this point. So let us flood the quantum field with a better way of doing things. Let us flood the quantum field with the excitement of coming together with people who hold a different lens than we do to come up with awesome solutions for our local communities. And let us understand that just because we have our big fat opinions, sometimes an opinion is something that is there just to teach us about where we're at spiritually, and it doesn't need to be shared all over Facebook. Have your opinions, have them. Yet know that if you're going to express them, we live in a time frame where people are going to express theirs right back, okay? So do our best to understand that our understanding of coming together for the highest good and the application of that understanding is far more important than squawking our opinions just to be heard on social media. You can have your opinion, okay? Let's turn our opinions into positive action instead of just opinions. Because really an opinion is just a viewpoint based upon the information we've accrued at that time. And if our opinions aren't subject to evolution, when we are placed in a situation with differing facts, then those become zealous beliefs. And I do have a zealous belief that racism is wrong. I'll own that right to my death because that's how I feel about it. So it doesn't matter my opinion on it because that's my belief. However, I also believe in coming forward and working together on the quantum fabric of our country so that we can get through this weird, awkward time moving into the time frame of the feminine. Let's use this 0-degree Libra moon that came in under the full super moon during the spring equinox to bring balance and temperance. And challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to come to a solution with other people that have polarizing opinions than you do. Challenge yourself to not just fall into the bumper sticker responses and go into a place of writing them off. And it doesn't mean that we have to get into a conversation or solve the world's problems. And sometimes it's probably just a good idea to walk away and say, whatever, Uncle John, you have your opinion, I have mine, blah. Yet you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about how to avoid a civil war. And we do that by recognizing the compassionate, kind, deep, underlying love in the humanity that we are bumping elbows with. So, it's been a big podcast. We are, good heavens, almost 9 minutes over time here, yet I really wanted to cover this in depth with everybody because I've been getting a lot of email on it. So, gang, let's just keep shining, okay? Just a few quick announcements before I tag out here with you. Anybody who is going to be in the area of Billings, Montana, coming up here in April. Okay. Anybody coming in on April? I'm going to be putting on a forum, April 6th, that's all about actually being able to use the energy in your body to be able to heal. So if you are a healer, if you're a psychic, if you're a tarot reader, if you're somebody out there who is in the healing arts already, I'm going to break it down as to how these energies actually work with the flesh and answer some questions that people are having regarding, okay, I know I'm a Reiki master, yet how is this actually working for the purpose of allowing people to remove those, quote, blocks that we put in our head that say, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it. So this is a forum that's open to beginners. It's open to long-term professionals. I've been gifted with some information from the angelic realm about why this works through the quantum field and how we can actually apply that. So if you go online to my website, you can go to DanielleEgnew-advisor.com/events. Go to the events page and you can purchase tickets for that event in Billings, Montana at Barjohn's Books. Again, that's coming up on Saturday, April 6th. And I've got a very exciting announcement. As per a lot of many of your requests, my wife, who is an empathic health and fitness professional, and myself are going to be doing a weekly podcast called Tequila and Tourmaline. I'm tequila, she's tourmaline. And we're going to be bringing forward information on the mind-body-spirit connection of health and wellness in America, what it means, how are we spiritually storing materials in the body. We're going to be launching this podcast coming out, and it's going to be something that you can actually have a live call-in number to actually call and ask us questions live. Is that cool or what? We're going to live stream it on Facebook, and we're going to be starting that on Monday, April 8th. Okay, it's going to be a Monday night show, so we're going to bring some pep back into your Mondays, and we hope that you join us. Well, the show's going to be going live Monday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. That is 6 p.m. Pacific Time or 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can watch that online. It's a free podcast. And ask us your questions. Call in. We'll have a call-in number as well. And those podcast archives are going to be distributed all over the place. The same place as the archives of InPsight Radio. So you'll find it on Stitcher, Google Play, Apple, iTunes. You'll find it on Intune. You'll find it on Spotify. Everywhere where you can find the archives of this program, you will also find Tequila and Tourmaline, our weekly call-in show on Mondays. So just a heads up, and let's all go and just heal. Let's all go heal the world during this Libra moon. It's all about balance and awesomeness. So everybody, go be awesome. I love you all, and we will see you next week.